The old couple walked slowly along the silent dock as the evening sky turned soft grey and blue. The wooden boards beneath their feet were cracked and uneven, yet they kept moving with quiet patience. The man's name was Sam and the woman beside him was Ruth. Their hands were joined, not tightly, but with the kind of grip that came from many years of shared life. They had learned long ago how to walk together without speaking much. Every step they took carried memories of better days, days when they were needed and welcomed. Sam had spent his whole life working with his hands. He repaired machines, cleaned tools, and fixed things others had given up on. Ruth worked just as hard, caring for homes that were never hers and people who rarely noticed her effort. Together they raised 3 children in a small house filled with noise and warmth. Back then, the future felt secure. They believed love and sacrifice would always return to them when they needed it most. Time slowly proved that belief wrong. The years passed quietly, and the children grew busy with their own lives. Phone calls became short and visits became rare. Promises were often made but rarely kept. When Sam's health began to weaken and Ruth found it harder to work long hours, money became tight. They tried not to complain and never asked for help directly. They believed their children would notice on their own. But silence answered them instead. The day the landlord locked the door was the day everything changed. Sam stood outside holding the key that no longer worked while Ruth sat on the stairs with her bag beside her. They tried calling their children again and again, but the calls went unanswered. No messages came back. The house they had filled with love was suddenly no longer theirs. That evening, they walked away without knowing where they would sleep. They reached the old harbor just as the sun began to sink. The place was quiet, almost forgotten by the city that buzzed nearby. Old cranes stood still, and broken lights flickered weakly. At the far end of the dock rested a massive cargo ship, leaning slightly as if tired from many years of service. Its metal body was covered in rust, and its name was barely readable. People avoided it, believing it was unsafe and empty. To Sam and Ruth, it looked like protection from the cold night ahead. Climbing aboard the ship took effort. Sam moved carefully, testing each step, while Ruth held onto the railing. The ship made soft groaning sounds as if it were breathing. Inside, the air was stale but dry. Long corridors stretched into darkness, filled with shadows and old echoes. The couple found a spot where the floor felt strong and the walls blocked the wind. Sam spread the thin blanket they carried, and Ruth sat down slowly, resting her tired body. For a long time, they said nothing. The ship rocked gently with the water, and the sound felt almost calming. Ruth finally spoke in a low voice, saying that at least they were together. Sam nodded. Being together was the one thing life had not taken from them yet. Still, a heavy sadness rested between them. They wondered how everything had led them to this forgotten place. As the night deepened, Sam explored a little while Ruth rested. He noticed that some doors were locked tight, unlike others that hung open and broken. The locks looked strong and untouched. On one door, there were faded markings and numbers scratched into the metal. Sam could not understand their meaning, but something about them made him uneasy. This ship was not as empty as it appeared. Ruth woke later and asked Sam what he had seen. He told her only that the ship was strange and that they should stay close to each other. Ruth trusted his judgment. She had always trusted him. They shared a simple meal from what little food they had left. Hunger was present, but they ate slowly, saving as much as possible for later days they hoped would not come. That night, Ruth dreamed of their old home. She saw the kitchen window glowing with warm light and heard laughter echoing from the past. When she woke, the ship felt colder than before. Sam was awake too, staring at the ceiling. He was thinking about the markings on the door and the feeling that something important was hidden here. Still, he said nothing, choosing to let Ruth rest. The next morning arrived quietly. Sunlight filtered through broken windows, lighting up dust floating in the air. The harbor looked peaceful from inside the ship. For a moment, Sam imagined this place as a temporary pause, not an ending. He helped Ruth stand, and they decided to explore a little more, hoping to find a safer area or maybe something useful. As they walked deeper into the ship, they noticed signs of careful organization left behind. Some areas were too clean for a place abandoned so long ago. Ruth felt nervous, but Sam reassured her with a gentle smile. He reminded her that they had survived many hard times before. This was just another challenge, he said, though even he was unsure. They reached a large sealed room with heavy metal doors. The same numbers Sam had seen earlier appeared again, clearer this time. Ruth asked what they meant. Sam shook his head slowly. He did not know, but he felt that the ship was guarding something valuable, something forgotten or hidden away on purpose. A quiet feeling settled in his chest, part fear and part curiosity. As they turned back, footsteps echoed faintly from another part of the ship. Both of them froze. The sound was distant, slow, and careful. Someone else might be nearby, or maybe the ship was simply shifting. Sam placed himself slightly in front of Ruth, ready to protect her in any way he could. The footsteps stopped as suddenly as they began. They returned to their resting place without speaking. The silence felt heavier now, filled with questions they could not answer. Sam sat beside Ruth and held her hand, feeling her warmth. Whatever this ship was hiding, it had already changed their fate. They did not know it yet, but this rusted cargo ship carried a secret worth $275 million, and their lives were about to take a turn they never imagined. Morning light moved slowly through the broken windows of the ship and touched the cold metal walls. Sam woke before Ruth, as he often did, listening to the quiet sounds around them. The harbor was still, and the water below made soft movements against the ship's body. For a brief moment, he forgot where they were. Then the weight of reality returned, heavy and familiar. He turned his head and watched Ruth sleep, her face calm but tired, shaped by years of quiet strength. Ruth woke soon after and sat up carefully. She looked around, still adjusting to the strange place they now called shelter. Sam handed her a small piece of bread, and they shared it slowly. Food was already becoming a concern, but neither of them said it out loud. They had learned that worry did not disappear when spoken. Sometimes silence was easier to carry. After resting, they decided to explore the ship again in daylight. Darkness had hidden too much the night before. As they walked deeper inside, the ship felt less abandoned than it first appeared. Some paths were blocked with care, not collapse. Certain doors were sealed tightly, protected from time and weather. Sam noticed that dust was lighter in some areas, as if someone had been there not too long ago. Ruth felt uneasy and stayed close to Sam. Her hand rested lightly on his arm as they moved. The ship's corridors felt long and confusing, like a maze built to keep people away from something important. Sam tried to remember the way back, marking turns in his mind. He did not want them to get lost inside this giant metal shell. They returned to the door with the strange numbers written near the lock. In daylight, the markings were clearer. The numbers were written carefully, not randomly. Ruth looked at Sam and asked softly if he thought the door led to something dangerous. Sam shook his head. He did not feel danger from it. Instead, he felt mystery, like the door was waiting rather than warning. They heard voices suddenly, distant but real. Sam and Ruth froze. The voices were low and unclear, coming from somewhere above them. Ruth's heart raced, and Sam guided her back behind a large metal wall. They waited in silence. The voices passed and faded away. Whoever it was did not come close, but the presence of others changed everything. They were not alone on this ship. After the voices disappeared, Ruth whispered that they should leave the ship while they still could. Sam understood her fear. Still, he reminded her that they had nowhere else to go. The city outside had already turned its back on them. At least here, they had walls and cover. Ruth nodded slowly, trusting Sam again, as she always had. Later that day, they explored another section of the ship and found an old storage area. Inside were empty crates, tools, and shelves that once held valuable cargo. Some crates were broken open, but others remained sealed. Sam checked them carefully and found nothing useful at first. Then, behind a stack of metal boxes, he discovered a small control room. The room was filled with old equipment, screens, and switches. Most of it looked outdated but well protected. Ruth watched as Sam examined the controls. One screen flickered to life briefly when Sam touched a switch. Numbers appeared, then disappeared. Sam felt his heart beat faster. This ship was not just abandoned. It was forgotten on purpose. As the hours passed, Sam and Ruth returned to their resting spot. They talked quietly about their children, not with anger, but with sadness. Ruth wondered if they were remembered at all. Sam said nothing, but his eyes showed pain. He believed their children had chosen distance because it was easier than responsibility. That night, rain began to fall, tapping softly against the metal walls. The ship felt alive again, reacting to the weather like an old creature waking from sleep. Sam lay awake, thinking. The sealed doors, the numbers, the voices, and the control room all pointed to something hidden. He felt that finding the truth might change everything, for better or worse. The next morning, Sam decided to return to the sealed door alone. Ruth did not want him to go, but he promised to be careful. He followed the corridors slowly until he reached the door. This time, he noticed a small panel beside the lock. It required a code. The numbers scratched nearby suddenly made sense. Sam entered the numbers with shaking hands. The panel made a quiet sound, and the lock shifted slightly. The door did not open fully, but it unlocked. Sam stepped back, surprised and unsure. He did not open it yet. He wanted Ruth there with him. Whatever was behind that door, they would face it together. When Sam returned and told Ruth what happened, her fear returned, but so did curiosity. They waited until evening, listening carefully for voices. When the ship was quiet again, they returned to the sealed door together. Sam placed his hand on the metal, feeling its cold surface. Ruth stood beside him, holding his arm. They opened the door slowly. Inside was a massive room filled with secured containers and digital systems still running on backup power. Lights glowed softly, revealing rows of sealed cases marked with symbols and numbers. Ruth gasped quietly. Sam understood instantly. This was not ordinary cargo. This was wealth hidden away and forgotten. A screen on the wall displayed a number so large Ruth could not understand it at first. Sam stared at it, his breath caught in his chest. The value listed was $275 million. The ship had been holding this fortune all along, untouched and unseen. Ruth felt weak and sat down slowly. Sam stood frozen, trying to understand what this meant. They had come here searching only for shelter, and instead they had found something powerful enough to change their lives. Yet fear returned quickly. Wealth like this did not remain unguarded without reason. As they closed the door and returned to their place, neither of them spoke. Their world had shifted again, but this time in a way they could not control. They did not know who else knew about the cargo, or what would happen if others discovered they were here. One thing was certain. Their quiet life of survival was over, and the ship's secret would soon pull them into something much bigger than themselves. The night after discovering the hidden room felt heavier than any night before. Sam and Ruth sat close together, listening to the ship as it creaked and breathed around them. The sound of water below felt louder now, as if the sea itself knew what rested inside the ship. Neither of them slept much. Their minds were filled with questions they could not escape. Shelter had turned into responsibility, and safety had turned into uncertainty. When morning came, Ruth was the first to speak. She said the money did not feel real to her. It felt like something borrowed from another life, a life meant for people who were powerful and protected. Sam listened carefully. He felt the same way. They had lived quietly for decades, never wanting more than peace and dignity. The idea that such a fortune had entered their lives felt almost wrong. Sam suggested they should leave the ship and forget what they had seen. Ruth nodded at first, but fear quickly replaced relief. Leaving meant returning to the streets with nothing. Staying meant danger from people who might want what was hidden. The choice was painful because both paths carried risk. They decided to wait and observe before making any decision. That afternoon, they heard voices again. This time, the voices were closer and clearer. Sam and Ruth hid behind large containers and listened carefully. The voices belonged to two men searching through parts of the ship. They spoke quietly but with confidence, as if they knew the place well. Ruth's hands trembled, and Sam held them gently, reminding her to stay calm. The men moved through the ship slowly, checking rooms and corridors. They did not seem surprised by the ship's condition. One of them mentioned that the ship had not been touched in years, while the other said that valuable things were sometimes forgotten on purpose. Sam realized these people might already suspect something. The danger was no longer distant. After the men left the area, Sam and Ruth stayed hidden for a long time. When silence finally returned, Sam knew they could not remain unnoticed forever. Their presence would eventually be discovered. He told Ruth that they needed a plan, not to take the money, but to protect themselves. They returned quietly to the sealed room. Sam looked again at the containers and systems. Everything was organized and recorded. This was not random storage. Someone had designed this place carefully. Ruth noticed documents inside a secured case that explained ownership and tracking. Sam understood that this money belonged to organizations that operated far from ordinary people. Touching it could bring serious trouble. Ruth suggested they should report what they found to the authorities. Sam considered it but worried that doing so might place them in danger. Powerful interests often moved faster than help. They needed to be careful not to be seen as thieves or witnesses. Their age and weakness offered no protection here. As evening approached, they heard footsteps again, but this time closer than before. Sam and Ruth retreated to their resting place, hoping to appear like nothing more than tired travelers. The footsteps stopped near them. A voice spoke gently, asking if anyone was there. Sam answered calmly, explaining they were an elderly couple seeking shelter. A man stepped into view. He looked surprised but not angry. He introduced himself as Leo, saying he worked security for private shipping companies. He explained that the ship was under observation and that people were checking it occasionally. Leo said the couple should not be here because the place was unsafe. Sam asked carefully what kind of danger existed. Leo hesitated, then said that old assets were sometimes connected to unfinished business. He warned them that staying could invite problems they could not handle. Ruth asked if anyone else knew about the ship's secret. Leo did not answer directly, which told Sam everything he needed to know. Leo offered to help them leave quietly and safely. Ruth looked at Sam, unsure. Sam asked Leo why he cared. Leo admitted that his own parents had been left alone in their old age. He said he could not ignore another couple facing the same pain. His voice held honesty. That night, Sam and Ruth discussed everything again. Leaving meant safety but also returning to nothing. Staying meant standing near something powerful and dangerous. Ruth said that whatever choice they made, they must protect their dignity. They had lost many things, but not their values. The next morning, Sam made his decision. He told Ruth they would leave the ship with Leo's help. The money was not theirs, and keeping it would only bring fear. Ruth agreed, though sadness filled her eyes. They packed their small bag and prepared to leave. Before leaving, Sam returned one last time to the sealed room. He looked at the containers and screens. Instead of regret, he felt relief. They had survived hardship before without wealth, and they could do it again. What mattered was staying together. As they walked toward the exit, alarms suddenly sounded faintly inside the ship. Voices echoed again, louder and more urgent. Leo appeared quickly, telling them it was time to go. They moved carefully and quietly, guided through hidden paths Leo knew well. The ship behind them felt different now, no longer a shelter but a memory. As they stepped onto the dock, Ruth looked back one last time. She whispered goodbye, not to the money, but to the strange chapter of their lives that had almost changed everything. They did not know what waited ahead. But for the first time in a long while, Sam felt peace in his chest. They had chosen safety over temptation and integrity over fear. Yet fate was not finished with them. Their quiet presence on that ship had already been noticed, and the world beyond the dock was about to respond in ways they never expected. Sam and Ruth walked away from the harbor with slow steps as the early light touched the quiet streets. The air felt different now, lighter but uncertain. They carried nothing new with them, yet something inside them had changed. For the first time in many months, they were moving forward instead of waiting. The ship remained behind them, holding its secret, but its shadow still followed their thoughts. Leo guided them to a small community center not far from the docks. It was a simple building with warm lights and open doors. Inside, people spoke softly and shared food and tea. Sam and Ruth were welcomed without questions. The kindness felt unfamiliar at first. Ruth's eyes filled with tears as she realized how long it had been since anyone had treated them with care. Over the next few days, Leo stayed in contact. He kept his promise and checked on them often. He explained that the ship was now under strict watch and that the hidden cargo would soon be moved through proper legal channels. Sam felt relief knowing the responsibility was no longer theirs. The fear that had lived in his chest slowly loosened its grip. Life at the center was modest but stable. Sam helped fix broken chairs and lights, while Ruth assisted in the kitchen. Their hands found purpose again. They were not rich, but they were useful, and that mattered more than money ever had. Each night, they rested knowing they were safe, even if their future was still unclear. One afternoon, a woman from the center asked Sam and Ruth about their family. Ruth answered honestly but without bitterness. She said their children had chosen busy lives and had forgotten where they came from. The woman listened and said that sometimes people return when they are ready to face their past. Ruth nodded, though she did not expect anything anymore. Weeks passed quietly. Then one morning, a letter arrived addressed to Sam and Ruth. It came from a legal office connected to the ship. The letter explained that during the investigation, records showed that Sam had unknowingly performed repair work years earlier on systems connected to the cargo ship. Because of this, and because of his cooperation and silence, a legal reward was approved for him and Ruth. The amount was not millions. It was not a fortune meant to change the world. It was enough to give them a small home, medical care, and stability for the rest of their lives. Sam read the letter twice, unable to speak. Ruth placed her hand on his shoulder and smiled gently. This was not greed rewarding them. It was fairness finding its way back. They moved into a small apartment near a park. The place was quiet and filled with light. Ruth planted flowers on the balcony, and Sam fixed an old table that became their favorite spot for tea. Their days were simple, but peace filled every corner. They no longer feared nights or doors that would not open. One evening, a knock came at the door. Ruth opened it slowly and froze. Their eldest child stood there, older and nervous. Time passed in silence before words finally came. Apologies followed, not perfect or complete, but real enough to begin healing. Sam listened without anger. Ruth listened with tired hope. The reunion did not erase the past, but it opened a path forward. Contact returned slowly, carefully. The couple did not depend on it. They had learned that love could not be forced, only offered. Whatever came next would be accepted without fear. Months later, Sam and Ruth returned once more to the harbor, standing at a distance. The old ship was gone, replaced by empty water and open sky. Ruth squeezed Sam's hand and said the ship had given them shelter when no one else did. Sam agreed. It had tested them, but it had also reminded them who they were. They walked away again, this time without sadness. They had faced abandonment, fear, and temptation, and had chosen dignity every time. In the end, the true treasure was not the money hidden in rusted walls. It was the strength they carried through every loss and every quiet night. As they returned home, Ruth laughed softly, a sound Sam had not heard in years. Life had not returned what was taken, but it had given them something better. Peace, purpose, and the knowledge that even in forgotten places, kindness and honesty could still change everything.